So welcome everybody, thank you for sparing the time to come this afternoon to talk about Mobilise 2018-19. We're just going back to Mobilise because we think people now have disassociated Mobilise with just being about TAs, so we think we're safe in just calling it Mobilise now, so not giving it a name specifically this year. So just to start off with a recap, really, you have kind of should be slightly familiar to you by now, but just a reminder of the underlying sort of principles of Mobilise and where it was born from the LLP, from its inception a long time ago it seems now. But bearing in mind it's all about having outcomes for children at the heart of everything that we do. And if you think about the implementation guidance that we're going to be using throughout the year to run alongside as a complementary guidance, then that really is what it's all about, and thinking about actually what's the priority in your school, what is it that's going to be sort of a quick game and have impact in your schools. So from the feedback that we've received from schools over the last 2 years now, collaboration comes up number one every time. It's all about, sector-led, it's about schools working together, having those professional dialogues, and really sharing ideas and what's worked and arguably more importantly what hasn't worked in some schools, and unpicking why does it work in some settings and not others, with some key stages and not others. So sharing that knowledge has been invaluable, so obviously that's the way we're going to continue. Obviously evidence informed, using that to inform improvement in your schools. I think this is what here it's about, and we're seeing again from feedback that it's really starting to make a difference in schools. The questioning, the language of teachers, senior leaders and teaching assistants in schools is about, well, how do you know that? What's your evidence for that? Where have you got that from? Rather than just, oh, that sounds like a good idea, let's run with that, without actually considering where the evidence has come from and unpicking it a little bit further. And then, as I said, looking at implementation and evaluation as we go through the year. So the LLP have majority, Gavin from the LLP, is anybody else from the LLP? Right. No, so Gavin, thank you, will tell you that this is the majority of the budget, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's a strong belief in this is the way for schools to work together and to share what's going on and learn from each other. So again, outcomes for children at the heart of everything, and for young people, and to take ownership really and share that practice widely. And I can tell you that because I now work in other authorities other than Lincolnshire, that we are way ahead of the game in Lincolnshire with this, and there are lots of talks going on that I can't talk about at the moment, but there are lots of really exciting things hopefully going to happen where Lincolnshire is going to be held up as this is the way forward for evidence-informed improvement in schools. So some really exciting news to look out for. So, other authorities that I'm working in as well are really looking at the model that we've developed over the last couple of years. So it's a thank you as well to all of you that have been involved in that journey that we've been on, I use the J word, to actually say that your feedback, nobody's ever done scale up on this scale before. This is something quite unprecedented. So thank you to you, and we do take feedback on board and we keep shaping and reshaping, which is why it's quite tricky when we're saying this. People are saying to us in feedback, can we please know what we're doing each term? And I would say to you, do you get your planning from all your teachers for the summer term in September? No, because it's shaped by assessment as you go along. So whilst we've given you a bit of an overview, that was printed over a week ago, and we've already changed and had discussions this morning about what we think we want to change already based on some discussions at the research conference yesterday. So things are changing all the time, and we reserve the right to respond to that. Okay, so, but we do sort of feel that this is hopefully something that the Mobilise team isn't just delivering to schools and here you go, this is the way to do it. We are trying to shape things, and our cluster leads are really important, particularly in that. So the next phase of Mobilise is looking at achieving those goals that the LLP have set out, and really getting schools into thinking about how to implement evidence before they make decisions, before school leaders make decisions, but also at classroom level as well, so that it's based on evidence and what will work, and trying things out and being happy to talk about what things have worked and what things haven't worked and why they haven't worked, and to learn from that. So we will be using the findings from the neuroscience trials, which I know some of your schools, thank you again, were involved in, and we'll be looking at sort of disseminating some of that into your schools through the various different projects, and then with a view to some schools taking part in further trials, either replication of the neuroscience to see whether actually it does work on a larger scale and in different contexts, but also with a view to schools starting to try things out for themselves, but with some grant funding. So, and we'll talk a bit more about that as a discrete choice. So, have we arrived at the choices? I'm sure, did you all receive, and you've all seen the overview, so you're kind of familiar with what the different choices are. But the advisory board, which is made up of a group of, a volunteer group of head teachers from around the county, from primary, secondary and grammar schools included, have come together and they've had discussions about actually what are the issues in Lincolnshire at the moment in our schools, what are the real priorities for Lincolnshire, what's going to impact on our children and young people. It's from feedback from base camps. We've got Camilla, one of our cluster leads, who's one of our intelligence moles, who feeds back to us on what's going on as well. And lots of talk around the county has been from the SIF bids for schools that are taking part in LEAP and LAMP. And I know, again, some of you are already involved in LEAP and LAMP, and saying, this sounds really good, and I'm hearing other head teachers talk about this, so how can we access this? So again, we're working with our partners at Connect and Equate to bring those resources and kind of mobilise them, if you like, but use the learning that the other teaching schools as part of the LTT to inform what we do next year. Okay, so everything based, as you would expect, in evidence. So you'll be obviously very familiar with this, the toolkit, but just to highlight for you, as things have shifted a bit and some things have been added, if you haven't looked at this too lately. Again, feedback and marking, metacognition, and with us focusing on memory, we're keeping those in for next year because we're finding that they've been popular. People are saying actually we need time to embed in the same way some schools did with a teaching assistant project. And the ones that add value are all around independent learning. So again, that's going to be a theme that runs through all of the choices next year. So we're trying to address the things that we know will have impact, and beautifully and conveniently at the least cost to your schools, which is obviously consideration. So just going to share with you a film regarding the feedback and marking first year, and also just one little snippet of the cognitive theory and memory. So some of you I know have been involved in those choices, some of you from the teaching assistance projects might be considering those. So we've got Claire and Beth, who very bravely were filmed just talking as an account of practice of what they have done in the first year. So I'll hand it over to them, and they're brilliant children.
The choice that we chose last year was the cognition and memory because in our school we've got quite a high percentage of SEN children, and one thing that comes back from reports from the outside professionals is that they're struggling with their memory and their recall of facts and things like that. So we specifically chose this option because we thought it would benefit our school more. From the first cluster meeting, we were given lots of studies to look at, and the study that kind of caught my eye the most was the Lightner study from 1972. It's about spaced repetition learning. You teach something for one day and you might go over it the next day, but then you would leave it a couple of days, let the children almost forget what it is they've learned, so they're able to then try and recall it a couple of days later, and then gradually that space gets longer and longer. So we decided to take a proportion of our Year 1 children, the children who were finding it tricky to recall spellings, not just in their writing but during assessment times as well. I've created a spaced repetition learning model where we go out of the classroom, they work in partners and they use 3 envelopes to move their spellings on throughout the week.
Yeah, One. Did you try? You get one wrong, you need to leave it in that envelope. Goes back in the same envelope, so we'll try it the next day. If you get them right, they go in the green one.
And then sometimes we don't try it the next day, do we? Sometimes we have to wait
for a whole week
before you
do it again.
The children get 5 spellings every week and they can practice those spellings every day if they don't get them right. If they get them right, it moves to every other day, and if they get them right again, it moves to every week. And after 3 or 4 weeks, those spellings disappear and then we only recall them at the end of the term. The impact has been quite significant with several of the children. One child has gone from only recalling 3 words out of 9 at the end of a full term assessment to recalling 27 out of 32 words, which has had a huge impact. What have you learned?
To do my spellings even more better. Normally I were ots instead of were as. So now I get it right because I did my spellings I was.
All the children on the study got 80% or higher on the end of term assessment for all the spellings that they had done.
When I do my spelling test, I feel proud of myself because I got 5 out of 5.
The impact it's had on the school has been really significant, and it's really given us the opportunity to take a look at how other things are developing within school in terms of interventions and things that are taking place. So it's been able to give me the time to sit back and think about how we can develop things in the future. So looking at interventions and moving those forward, but also looking at how we can incorporate the light and repetition model into everyday learning as well.
The yellow one, so we can have a go at that one tomorrow.
So last year we did Mobilise for the TAs and we found it really successful. So this year we've decided to continue that, but also we had an Ofsted inspection that highlighted marking as an area of improvement. So we chose to do the marking and feedback Mobilise choice as well. We've looked at a series of different research articles with different recommendations about things that have worked and things that haven't worked, all to do with feedback and marking and peer assessment as well. The teachers were spending a long time marking the books. When we looked at the work in the books, some key areas were being missed. So although the teachers were marking, they were not picking up certain things that would have been easy fixes to make sure that the children make good progress. We had verbal feedback as part of our marking policy, but we decided to put a greater emphasis on that. So that's during the lesson, the adults go around and they give live feedback during their lesson, and we note in the book VF when we've given a child feedback, and that's all we write down, but the child has that then acts upon that, so we can see the progress from that verbal feedback in their books. We've also put in place pupil consultations, which involves the teacher and one pupil at a time. So it's a one-to-one conversation, and this kind of gives delayed feedback rather than live feedback. So we'll look back at a piece of work maybe done the week before, and look at what went well in the work and what they need to do to improve. And it's a two-way conversation between the teacher and the pupil. So after a lesson, instead of marking the books, the teacher now has time to look through every child's book and assess where they are and what they need for the next lesson. Instead of taking a long time to write in the books, they now can just sort the books, so into piles of who's understood it, who hasn't, who needs reteaching, or who needs just a little bit of editing perhaps. Then the next lesson, the teacher can either give whole class feedback if there's a big issue with a lot of children, or pull off a group and give them group feedback, or speak to individuals. So we had in place last year peer marking, we called it peer marking, and we've changed the emphasis from marking to feedback, so it's now peer feedback. Now the children in pairs work together on one book, and the child whose book it is, they're in charge of the editing, and the other child is there to give advice, to give feedback.
When it was in my book, I didn't used to read the green pen in my book. I used to just ignore it because I got confused a lot.
The teacher couldn't put everything down because it would take too much room up.
If she'd written something and we didn't get it, we couldn't just ask, but if we're having a conversation, then we can just ask her.
It's had a positive impact on progress. The children are making at least as much progress as they were with the marking. A lot of children have made accelerated progress.
Well, it makes an impact on my work, so it makes it a lot better because I understand what the teacher means.
Now I get taught to, it's a lot easier, and I actually do the stuff in my book.
As a teacher, there's a lot more time spent looking at what the children need to know, rather than writing comments for somebody else's benefit that the children may or may not understand. When we started out, we picked about 6 children per class to trial it, to see if the verbal feedback and the pupil conferences worked, and we had the same sort of impact as marking, or better. And then we gradually rolled it out so that every class, the whole class, this is how we are feeding back to the children. We're hoping that this will continue next year, and we're going to be adapting the marking policy to reflect the changes.
Okay, they're fantastic, aren't they? We're really, really pleased with those. Really great to actually see in practice what's happening in schools across the county. We're aware that we've only shown you the primary examples there, but we have got some filming that will go on throughout secondary and special schools in the county, so we'll let you know when those are available to view as well. But fantastic to see.